Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriations and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Thursday, June 9th. The time now is 2:01. Notice for this budget hearing were disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was given on May 26th, followed by June 2nd. The committee will now hear Bill 276-36 COR from the Committee on Rules by the request of the I Maga'hågan Guåhan, the Governor of Guam, in accordance with the Organic Act of Guam, an act making appropriation for the operation of the executive branch of the Government of Guam for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, making other appropriations and establishing miscellaneous and administrative provisions relative to the Department of CHamoru Affairs. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm joined by my colleague, Senator Tello Taidewi. Faithful colleague. But you know, my other colleagues have expressed that they'll try to make it. The oversight chair was not able to make it today because of some issues. But she's watching, and her staffs are keeping tab of what's discussed here today. Okay? And those testifying on behalf of the Department of CHamoru Affairs budget, we have Mr. Wampat and Marilyn Ridges. And with that, I will just read off now the rules of engagement. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized to about 5 minutes. But I know if you need additional time, Mr. Wampat, you've got it, okay? Those testifying will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you are done, please remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by members of the committee. Questions and testimony shall be confined to the nature of the agenda, which is the budget of the Department of CHamoru Affairs. Personal inference as to the character or the motive of any senator or any individual testifying is not permitted. Any violation of this general rule of conduct will result in removal from the budget hearing. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum will be restricted from providing oral testimony and will be removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. Other questions may be submitted to the committee for submission to the agency for response. Please state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel to please rise as the Sergeant Arms will swear you in for all your testimony.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, you will affirm that any and all information provided today, whether it be verbally, electronically, and in writing, be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you out. Mr. Chair, under oath. You may proceed.
Thank you, Sergeant Arms. At this point, I'd ask now Mr. Wampat to please begin. And I understand you've got some PowerPoints or slides you want to present. You want to start? You want to have that prep now, or?
Yes, Senator. If you don't mind,
yes.
We can just I'll do the testimony along with the PowerPoint.
All right. If we can get there, you go. Please continue.
Okay. You can go ahead and move to the opening slide. Sus Masi. Hafiday Senators, Guahusi Melvin Wampat Borja. I am the president of Departamento ni Maga'hågan Guåhan CHamoru, or the Department of CHamoru Affairs, also known as DCA. DCA's mission is to create, develop, implement, and maintain an integrated program for the preservation, promotion, and advancement of the native CHamoru and other Asian Pacific residents of Guam. It is intended that the public corporation be the guiding force in all aspects of CHamoru culture, language, preservation, education, arts, humanities, and history through public policy, advocacy, research, publication, authentication, restoration, presentation, and production, and by providing and overseeing a repository for historical documents, cultural artifacts, and documentary and narrative film and video. DCA has 5 divisions: Cultura, which is also known as culture, División Inilegal Tinigi, Zanfinanagui, which is research, publication, and training, COSAS, which is the Guam Museum, Isengsung CHamoru, which is the CHamoru Village, and Agustin Guåhan, which is the Guam Archives. First, we'll start with CHamoru Village. Isengsung CHamoru was built in the 90s as a farmer's market and small business incubator meant to facilitate the sale of local produce and products and to be a launchpad for local entrepreneurs. Though business incubators are conceptually great, the reality is that when rental rates are so low to benefit businesses, the cost doesn't just disappear, it is usually subsidized by the government. That said, the CHamoru Village has become a staple in the community and continues to serve as a hub for locally sourced produce, local food, Guam-based goods, and entertainment. It continues to be one of our most frequented tourist attractions and generates valuable income for our small local businesses. And the village has seen some difficult times since the start of the pandemic. We are highly dependent on our non-appropriated funds, which comes from the revenues that we generate from rent and our Wednesday night market. The significant revenue decreases from the pandemic have forced us to lose critical services like security and waste disposal. However, due to our team's unwavering commitment and applaudable effort, we have managed to keep our doors open for business, and we are slowly recovering. We are currently pursuing a large capital improvement grant to help offset the cost of some much-needed renovations and upgrades to our current facility. For the COSAS, which operates the Guam and Chamorro Educational Facility, also known as the Senator Antonio M. Palomo Guam Museum, though the facility is much newer, it is by nature not a cheap one to operate. The facility houses Guam's cultural treasures and must maintain proper preservation standards of care. It is also important to note that when the Guam Museum was opened, it was under a management contract, a private management contract, which ended on March 31st, 2020. Since the contract expired, DCA has taken over management of the museum operations, which has been a difficult transition and has had a significant impact on our staff. Unlike the private contract, we have to adhere to government employee regulation and be challenging when it comes to after hours and weekend events. It is for this reason that we are attempting to fund additional museum assistance using our ARP award. Event bookings are critical for the museum, and we are highly dependent on generating revenues for the operations of the facilities. Supplementing our staffing pattern and additional museum assistance will drastically help us to manage not only event bookings, but it will also allow us to expand the hours of operations for museum tours while still maintaining our current responsibilities. For both of these facilities, we are dealing with staffing and resource shortages. However, we have made do and continue to deliver services to our community. However, the infusion of resources and staff support would allow us the opportunity to expand those services and increase the quality of our output. In regard to RPT, the Research, Publication, and Training, and the Guam Archives, both of these divisions are unfunded and dormant, but remain important aspects of our department, our goals, and our mandate. We have requested funding to start hiring and filling these positions, but until such time that these requests are supported, we are unable to deliver on the full scope of work that we are mandated to do. I'd like to close by responding directly to some of the questions provided to us in our budget conference from Senator San Agustin's office. Firstly, DCA currently has no outstanding obligations. We have procured the majority of budgeted supplies and equipment for the year. In regard to capital outlay projects to be implemented in FY 2022, we are hopeful to start work on the museum arch repair as well as a major water line repair at the CHamoru Village. The museum arch repair will be funded by hot bond and QC money awarded from GITA. For the CHamoru Village, the water line repair, we are hopeful to complete this project by September 2022. DCA does not receive any federal funding. It is 100% locally funded. Through FY 2023, though the FY 2023 budget is sufficient to keep our facilities open and our department operational, it is insufficient in regard to our ability to fulfill the entirety of our mandates. Currently, DCA has two divisions that I mentioned before, RPT and Guam Archives, that are currently dormant and unfunded. There are authorized positions that cannot be filled with our current resources, and the work in those areas remains incomplete. As many of you know, the two operational landmark facilities, the CHamoru Village and the Senator Antonio M. Palomo Guam Museum, still remain open and continue to provide valuable services to our community. However, both of those facilities are also in need of critical resources as well, particularly for the facility themselves. To date, we have filled the curator position and 3 museum assistant positions. This was in response to the ending of the management contract. The CHamoru Village manager position remains open, and we have hired an SPC in the interim as we await a full listing from DOA. We continue to recruit for the remaining funded vacancies. DCA was awarded $1.8 million in ARP funding, which will be primarily used to address our major facility issues and supplement our staffing shortage. We have received the money, and a spending plan has been submitted. We are aware of the 15% lapse to our budget, and we plan to use the balance to cover any possible shortfall for the Guam Museum arch repair, the arch repair project, as well as to cover the cost of the CHamoru Village utilities. As I stated earlier, the CHamoru Village is still recovering from significant revenue loss incurred during the COVID-19 lockdown. Sujus Masi. If you flip to the next slide, this is our budget breakdown for FY23. You will notice that our budget ceiling was less than the budget call, and the variance is primarily due to the unfunded additional staffing. We had requested for 6 Guam Museum assistants and 1 administrator for the Research, Publication, and Training Division, which was not funded. Next slide is our organizational chart. You'll notice underneath the President's office are the 5 divisions that we operate, and you'll notice in red are the vacant and unfunded positions. If you can flip to the next slide, these are a summary of our achievements for the Guam Museum. In DCA, we were able to reopen the Guam Museum and restart tours. We've had a total of approximately 4,554 visitors to the Guam Museum. The museum did showcase 2 rotating exhibits that we were able to do in collaboration and partnership with other entities. The Spirit of Budo exhibit, which was a collaboration with the Japanese Consulate of Guam, and the Finogi Chamorro exhibit, which was a collaboration with Brown University and Guampedia. We also launched virtual tours in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and decreased accessibility to the museum. We've partnered with several GovGuam agencies and community groups to host events at the Guam Museum, 2 of which to note to is the Guam War Claims Office and the DOA testing site for law enforcement agencies. We've also reopened the HITA Talks, which is the Guam Museum's version of the TED Talks. They're academic lecture series that we host in the theater and are also streaming online. We've also transitioned out of the Guam Museum operations contract and into from private operation into public management. On the next slide, our summary of achievements for 2021 to the present. We were able to reopen the CHamoru Village Wednesday night market. I just wanted to state for the record that the CHamoru Village did remain open through the pandemic. There, except for the lockdown, of course, and we were able to support our tenants by subsidizing some of the rental costs. We waived rental fees during the lockdown. They were only required to pay their common area fees, and then we allowed them to kind of set their hours according to their capacity. So some businesses decided to remain closed. Others just kind of decreased their hours of operation or maybe cut the weekend hours out of their schedules. But we worked with each tenant individually to provide that support and relief. But now the Wednesday night market is in full swing. It has been happening weekly. We just had an event last night, and it was a fairly large turnout. To date, CHamoru Village stalls or rental spaces are at approximately 95% occupancy. And we closed our 2020 Mes Chamorro festivities at the Guam Museum and the CHamoru Village this year, to include the CHamoru Month Decorating Contest, CHamoru Challenge Bowl, and an appreciation ceremony for our government agencies that participated. In the next slide, for FY 2022, our goals include the Guam Museum arch repair and the museum painting. I'm sure you've noticed that the Guam Museum arch is in need of some significant repair. Basically, what's happening is that the arch was constructed using prefabricated concrete paneling. And what happens is that as the humidity sets in, the panels and connections start to expand. And so the arch itself is structurally sound. It's not a safety issue, but what we're experiencing is condensation and leaking that's coming through when it rains. And so the project really is to assess, patch, and repair the arch and reseal it. And then there's also, we're trying to get use that funding as well to paint the exterior of the museum, which hasn't been done in about 7 years. We are hopeful to replace and repair some water infrastructure at the CHamoru Village. As you know, the facility was built in the 90s, and so there is significant wear and tear on the facility that needs to be addressed. Some of these are, including this water repair, are costing us money because of the upkeep and the increase in costs due to the deterioration of the facility. We are hopeful to complete the recruitment of the remaining funded personnel vacancies. We are excited about the launch of new rotating exhibits. Currently, we just closed the Finogi Chamorro exhibit. The next one will be done in partnership with the University of Guam, celebrating their 75th, I'm not sure, 70th anniversary of the university. And then the exhibit after that for the next fiscal year will be with the Guam Preservation Trust, focusing on the Spanish colonial period in Guam. We are also hopeful to enhance some of the visual aesthetics of the CHamoru Village. Again, I mentioned our pursuit of a capital improvement grant for some upgrades and renovations to the facility. In the next slide for our 2023 goals, we are hopeful for renovations and update of not only the CHamoru Village facility, but the reconstruction of Sagan I Maga'hågan Guåhan. That's the NAFTAN project. And that's to house the remains, the ancestral remains that are not covered under the new law that requires reinterment on the site that they were discovered. So there's a set of remains that were discovered in digs prior to 1979 that need a home. We'd like to update our fee structure for both the CHamoru Village and the Guam Museum, create new programs that directly benefit our communities, create a play and learning space in the Guam Museum for children up to age 9. This is in response to a recent training that our museum staff attended with the American Alliance for the Museums nationwide. A lot of museums are kind of revising their cafe gift shop operations to include more accessible spaces for young children in response to some of the decrease of childcare services. We are hopeful to create a resource center for patrons that will be located in our cafe gift shop area. So our goal here is to have the entire museum experience be educational. Prior, our gift shop really was just selling locally made items or museum items, and there wasn't much access to educational information. So our goal here is to create a research center built into that space so that the space can be utilized by patrons for research and academic purposes. Our goal, one of our other goals is to showcase a minimum of 2 rotating exhibits, to create a 1-week youth program during school breaks focusing on Guam history, and hire additional personnel for the Guam Museum to operate for longer hours and to open on Saturdays and some of the GovGuam holidays. Currently, our staffing pattern only allows for us to open for tours Tuesday through Friday. We'd really like to add weekend hours, possibly even evening hours, but it really just depends on how much staff we have that we can have available to staff those events. We continue to open for private events and government functions. Folks can, community members or government agencies can arrange to reserve space at the museum. And this is a part of our critical function because we, like I mentioned earlier, we're very dependent on our ability to generate revenue to supplement our operations. That's it, Senator. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Wampat. You're quick. You're good.
I was trying to keep it at the 5-minute limit. I figured we'll ask questions and I'll fill in the blanks from
You were
there.
okay. Time was, I wasn't worried about the time. What I'm concerned about is that I'm just looking at your budget and I'm looking at your slide that identifies your organizational chart. I see you have your building maintenance supervisor position. Is that still vacant or you're trying to fill that?
Sorry, which position?
The building, your organizational chart?
Yes.
Where you got your building maintenance supervisors vacant?
Yeah, so what we actually moved our building maintenance supervisor into the interim manager position. We had our previous CHamoru Village manager retired,
Okay.
And so that individual was stationed at the Guam Museum, but is now filling an SPC position in the interim until a manager is hired.
Okay. And you have the funding so far for that position to be filled, right?
Yes.
Okay. And then just looking at and the reason why I'm concerned, because you mentioned a lot of your renovation, repairs.
Correct.
You're gonna need a building maintenance supervisor to make sure it gets done, right?
Right.
You got recruitment in progress, program coordinator. I'm looking, as I go across your sheet, you got some vacant positions that's NF, not funded.
Right.
Is there a need for it to be funded?
Well, so the two major ones that we're really kind of focusing on is RPT and the Guam Archive. Now,
Right.
RPT, the significance of RPT and the role that it plays in DCA really is it's built to be our kind of academic center. And so, as you can imagine, because we are the storehouse for a lot of our national treasures, that also comes with a lot of intellectual value. And so RPT really is built to produce educational materials for the community. For those of you that are familiar with the Liheslaturan series, that was produced through RPT. Also the CHamoru dictionaries, but more than just an academic resource, it also provides us an opportunity to generate revenue that supports our operations and our programs. Currently, one of the challenges for us with the book inventory, just to kind of give you an example, is that when we went through our last couple audits, and we were able to end with a clean audit. However, this was one of the significant findings of the audit team, was that the inventory for the books was stagnant for quite some time. And it was because we weren't producing more texts, more resources, and we weren't moving those texts. Prior, the plan with Liheslaturan was that they were built to be an educational resource primarily for schools, and the books were supposed to be adopted by DOE. However, we found in years later that there were some issues with how those books were going to be folded into the classroom and utilized in the classroom. A lot of that inventory ended up being stagnant at DOE, and now, as I'm sure you know, there's other efforts to produce new school-based textbooks that are updated, that include more information, that engage in a collaborative process with educators, so that they're more comprehensive and more functional for the classroom. That said, because of that kind of shift in the way that we're utilizing these resources, now DOE is no longer using the Liheslaturan series, which means that we're not going to be selling those books to DOE. The advice from the audit team was that we have to make a decision. We either have to liquidate that entire inventory, we have to reinvest in reproducing the depleted volumes, or invest in producing more text. And so what we did is to kind of satisfy the audit team and to prevent that inventory from remaining stagnant, we just kind of took advantage of the opportunity during CHamoru, and we advertised it as a fire sale, so to speak. We cut the prices on the books, promoted them during the CHamoru month, and invited our community members to come and pick up copies of it. Turned out really well. We were able to move a significant amount of units out of that inventory. The dictionaries, of course, were the most popular items, but that was the most action that we've had on that inventory in quite some time. But moving into the future, the RPT really does provide us with an opportunity to leverage the intellectual property of the CHamoru people through the production of new academic resources. And so, there's a lot of ways that we could produce additional texts that could not only be used in schools, but also by community groups and organizations. There's been a lot of interest from the CHamoros who live in the diaspora, who are want more information or want more resources that they can utilize for their groups or their schools or their communities. So it's a great way for us to engage our community, but it's also an opportunity that we miss on without having people in place in RPT to develop new resources as we go. I'm sure that most of you have heard that we are close to opening the Guam Cultural Repository, which is really supposed to serve as the backside of the house of the Guam Museum. All of those artifacts come with information. And that information is, obviously valuable to our people for awareness and history, but it's also an opportunity for us to develop text and develop resources that can turn around and feed programs like ours.
Okay. I like the part when you mentioned DOE. When you mentioned they're not going to use it any longer, is that, are you saying then that they had a commitment and then they kind of like said, we're not going to use it anymore?
No, the commitment was already filled. They had already purchased those books for use in the classroom, but
Right.
the reality is that today they're not being utilized as heavily as they were when that process was first started. And because there have been other efforts to develop new texts for the classroom, we anticipate that those texts are what will be adopted next. And so there's always a possibility that DOE decides that they want to reinvest in Heleta, but even if that were the case, we would still have to go back in and repopulate the depleted volumes that we
Right.
don't have copies of anymore.
The reason why I asked that question, because you're the Department of CHamoru Affairs, and there's a CHamoru branch or division at DOE.
Right.
Where I would be bothered if they're trying to produce something that your department should be the one producing. And you should be the source of those texts. Because I don't see them going to whatever company in the States and buying, saying, hey, we want to order this, can you produce it for
Right.
us? When you guys should be doing it. And that's what concerns me. And I just wanted to make sure that I heard it correctly, okay? Because I will ask them that question. Are you trying to produce something? You shouldn't be producing it. Department of CHamoru Affairs should be doing it.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up, Senator, and I appreciate you kind of bringing light to this issue. Our perspective at DCA is that, DCA really should serve via mandate as the hub or the impetus for how we create these resources, and we really should be the lighthouse for all efforts that are done in this regard. Now, it's not to say that the Department of CHamoru Affairs wants to be a publishing house, for example. We don't have a desire to be a printer. But there are ways that we can partner, say, for example, with the University of Guam Press, which has, really stepped up in the last several years. Their operation has drastically changed from a, very kind of small, low-capacity press to a major player now in what we're seeing throughout the community. There's been a number of new titles that they've produced at a high quality. The University of Guam Press would be an ideal partner for the Department of CHamoru Affairs. Right. But I think that the key for us is that, we're able to play an active role in how those resources are developed, but less in how those resources are produced. We would want to partner with, an entity like UOG Press to actually produce it, but to manifest it into physical form like a book. Right. But the development of those texts should be done in cooperation with the Department of CHamoru Affairs.
Yes, well put. Another area I was concerned, not to talk about in Alahan, but I know that Senator Tello would like to know. Do you guys get involved with GEPAGU, the GEPAGU program down there? The one by the beach. Are you guys involved with them at all?
No.
Okay, and the reason why I asked that is because I've been approached by some of the folks down there, and I like to see how we can bring it back to life.
Well, I have had informal conversations with the mayor of Inalahan, and he had actually mentioned to me that one of his goals is to I guess strengthen the infrastructure of GEPAGU so that it mirrors or kind of emulates what we intended to do with the CHamoru Village, in the sense that he wants it to become a business space, a community space where small businesses and members of the community can, have a home to set up their operations and, benefit from the traffic that comes into the village. One of his concerns was that the GEPAGU traditionally is kind of like a pit stop. People will come down, drive through there, stop by for a short period, and then move on to the rest of their tour. But what he's really hoping for is to, create more opportunity for there to be extended engagement in Inalahan. So I have mentioned to him, that we're very willing to sit down with him and figure out how we can kind of use the history of the CHamoru village, some of our successes and challenges as we've developed this program, and how we can recreate it or build a new kind of approach to how that can be emulated in Gefpagu.
Yes, because I believe that the Guam Preservation Trust should be involved also in that, because there's a lot of, restoration program that should get involved in that one. But with that, I'd like to also recognize that we're joined by Senator Brown. But what my concern is that, Mr. Juanpe, is that as I look at your budget, you don't have a big budget. Does the CHamoru village still run as an incubator, an incubation program? CHamoru village, is it
Yes,
run?
yes, it is still being run as an incubator. Like I mentioned in my testimony, the incubator model is an honorable one, and it's definitely something that is important, is valuable for our community, especially as we attempt to develop more local small businesses. The challenge with an incubator is that across the board, even in the most successful models of incubator operations, incubators don't traditionally make money. They cost money. And it's, when you subsidize rent, the cost doesn't just vanish. It gets picked up by someone else, and that's us, the government. But we built this program in order to create the opportunity for businesses that may not have the kind of startup capital that a corporation would. And in that sense, it's highly valuable to our community. I think that the challenge is that the CHamoru village model is an old one, and we have yet to address the rising cost of services and goods and have that then reflect the rental rates and the fee schedule at the CHamoru village. The current rules and regulations do allow us to reassess the market and to reflect that in the fees, but to date that hasn't happened. In my research of those prior actions, there have been attempts to raise the rent, and none of them have been successful for different reasons. But I think that that's something that definitely needs to be addressed. I mean, I know nobody likes to hear conversations about raising costs and raising rent. Obviously we don't want to raise the rent at CHamoru Village, but the costs of the overhead and what we incur in order to maintain that operation have increased. I mean, everything across the board has increased.
Somebody has to pay for it.
Right.
At the bottom line. The reason why I bring that up, because, remember just recently we had the GUMA's graduation, the GUMA program, and I'm wondering where they're going. And if you have the program at the CHamoru Village, and if we can get it started down at Gefpagu, maybe the folks that are down south can go to that program, and then we can start it. We got to start somewhere.
We currently do have a partnership with the GUMAT program.
Okay.
The idea with the GUMAT program is that it's built to kind of identify different cottage industry vendors, and they do it village by village. And essentially what they're doing is creating, I'm oversimplifying this a bunch, but they create a roster of cottage industry vendors. And then from there, they work with each individual vendor to kind of develop their marketing platform, their business structure, their plans, and so on and so forth. As they start to mature those businesses, then their goal is to transition them into a brick and mortar, a physical location, and that's where the CHamoru Village comes in. So we've currently we've brought in 2 tenants from the GUMAT program who have gotten to that point where they're ready to kind of take that leap of faith and invest in a brick and mortar operation. But the goal really is for us to strengthen that partnership so that the CHamoru Village becomes the designated landing spot for these businesses as they mature. And that's a big part of the way the vision for the renovation and upgrade of the CHamoru Village. If we are successful in winning this capital improvement grant, it will not just renovate and upgrade the facility itself, but also allow us an opportunity to restructure, for lack of a better word, the way that we operate the incubator.
All right, okay, I got one final question before I ask my colleagues. You know those buildings that were built for the FESPAC?
Yes.
What's going on with that? Because I go by there
That
often,
is,
and it's always empty.
I'm glad that you asked about it. So currently, what we do is we utilize those spaces as part of the Wednesday night rental space. So smaller vendors that want to come in only for the Wednesday night, they can rent those huts out and then have their operation there during the Wednesday night. However, if part of our goal, if we are able to win this capital improvement grant, would be to enclose not all of those huts, because some of them we've identified as being ideal for the expansion of the Met-Cow market, the farmers market. As you know, there are other efforts that are attempting to infuse resources into the farmers market to give it kind of that shot in the arm and that upgrade that they need. And so we anticipate an expansion of that program. So some of the huts will be built, will undergo mild renovation, more just to make them more functional, but will remain open air for the expansion of the farmers market. But the remaining huts, the vast majority, about maybe 2/3 of them, will be converted either to food vendor units or to retail vendor units. And the designation was based on access to plumbing infrastructure that is required for a food vendor. The other part of that is that if you recall the Sagandinanya, which is in that kind of open, empty lot where we set up a lot of the pop-up vendors during the Wednesday night market, that used to be Sagandinanya. It was a wooden structure. It was really kind of a multi-purpose room and a community gathering space. And so one of the things that we're hopeful for is to reconstruct Sagandinanya as well as a community commercial kitchen, because there are operations like, you know, a lot of the recipients of or participants in the GUMAT program don't have the infrastructure for a full-blown food operation. But if we're able to construct a community commercial kitchen, it not only allows them access to the resource and the space that allows them to develop their business, it allows us another avenue to generate revenue for the Chamorro Village operation, but it also gives us an opportunity to provide community education for how to utilize locally produced food. If you remember during the pandemic, when food commodities that were subsidized by the federal government started to run out, our farmers really stepped up and started to provide local food commodities for our consumers. The problem is that a lot of those food commodities ended up going to waste because a lot of people are unfamiliar with how to produce or cook and prepare local produce. And so our goal with the community commercial kitchen is to provide an educational space. It's a great opportunity for us to partner with, say, for example, the GCC culinary program, and provide, you know, educational workshops to our community so that they can learn how to produce or prepare locally sourced food, impact a healthier diet, and, you know, make use of these commodities before they go to waste.
All right, thank you. Senator Tello, do you have anything of Mr. Wampat? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon to my colleagues as well as to DCA. And it's Mary, right, or Marilyn?
Marilyn.
Marilyn? Okay, I thought I heard Mary. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here. You know, when you were speaking to the oversight chair regarding the building maintenance supervisor, I think the person that was placed in there, her last name is Paulino, is that correct?
No, Jennifer Paulino was our former Chamorro Village manager. She's the one who retired.
Okay, so she's the one that left.
Yes.
And then, so who do you have in that place right now?
His name is Christopher Flores.
Is he, well, according to this chart, it looks like he is a CPC.
SPC.
I mean SPC,
Yes.
and then CV manager. So he's also taking over the building maintenance supervisor?
No, he was previously the building maintenance supervisor, and we moved him into an SPC in lieu of our manager because the manager position was vacant, and we didn't get a full list from DOA. And so we had to fill that position. We moved him into the interim to take over in the interim.
Yeah. Is he a classified or unclassified?
He is an unclassified employee.
Unclassified. So right now the building maintenance supervisor is?
Vacant.
Vacant. And nobody's there to, yeah.
Correct.
Is that a classified or unclassified position?
Which
Building
one?
maintenance supervisor.
The building maintenance supervisor is, I believe it's classified.
It's a,
Yes. The building
how can
maintenance
he, yeah, I mean, how is he able to
He
move
was an unclassified employee in that position.
in the building maintenance
Yes.
supervisor? Well, how's he supposed, how can he sit in a position that's a classified position and he's unclassified? If the building maintenance supervisor is supposed to be a classified position, how is he able to sit in that position if he was unclassified?
I'm not quite sure that he was in that position when I came into DCA, and he was unclassified in that position.
But the CV manager is an unclassified position? Or is that a classified
The
position?
CV manager,
Yeah,
that is a classified position.
and now he's classified.
No, because he's not officially in the the CV manager position is still open and in recruitment.
Okay, so you have unclassified individuals filling positions that are a classified position.
Well, he is there, the SPC is in lieu of a manager. So until he basically is holding that in the interim until we are able to hire a manager full-time.
Yeah, we're just, how can you do that? You can't do that. Oh my gosh.
Maybe Mr. Wampet need to explain, he's an acting and he's unclassified on the SPC position, correct?
Correct. So when I first came into DCA, there was a vacancy in the manager position. And what was done was that an SPC was hired in lieu of that manager.
That SPC is unclassified.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, see, that's,
I
yeah,
think you just
you know
need
what
to
I'm saying.
You just need to separate positions. I can see where Senator Tidy's come from. Maybe put a manager's position and then put an SPC below, and that he's covering it as non-classified.
Right.
And what, only because you merge them together, it's a very safe assumption it's the same person. The CV manager is also the SPC.
Right, we just listed it here. That's why right next to manager it says SPC ILO.
In lieu of?
Right.
Oh, okay, maybe
Yeah.
that's,
We can adjust the the bubble.
Well, I just think that, if we start, adjusting this to what fits, politically correct positions in here or unclassified hires, it's totally wrong. It defeats the purpose of having these particular positions as classified and then turning around and putting an unclassified individual in that position. Mel, I read your OPA audit report, and I hate to see that to be part of it, that these positions are being filled with unclassified individuals on a classified designated
Just to clarify,
position.
the individual is not filling that position. He's
Well,
serving that role until the position is filled.
Yeah, but still, it should be filled properly, and not, just, yeah, advertise, exactly. Okay, since I spoke on the OPA, well, it's something you need to look into, if you can, Mel, just to make sure that, your Ts are crossed and Is are audited to ensure that nothing is being done, unethical. The other one was, in the OPA report, it stated here that per the auditor's recommendation, maintaining an experienced full-time accountant would ensure that financial statements could be generated timely. I'm looking at your chart, and I'm looking for an accountant here. Is there an area here that?
No, we don't have an authorized position for that. And so what we did is that we first cleared with OPA if we could, basically we had two options. One was to hire a contracted bookkeeper, or that we could solicit support from DOA. So we've spoken with DOA. Director of DOA has agreed that they would give us that support. because we have Marilyn Regis, our PC3, as well as our administrative officer, Jana Borja, have been, they reconcile our books. And so that's really what we need, is somebody to reconcile it at the end of each month.
I'm sure Marilyn
And it's
would
just for us
appreciate
to
that.
create
Get somebody to-
the transparency and
Right.
the, how do you say, unbiased assessment of what our finances look like.
Yeah, because it talks about the, adjusting entries, not being recorded, statement closure process, et cetera, down the line. So,
Right, so
yeah.
in their assessment of our finances, they didn't find any major discrepancies with our numbers, our data, but it's a part of their process that they prefer, because it increases the level of accountability.
Okay. So you, in search of, or DOA is going to help you with
Yes,
that?
so
Okay.
we have resolved this issue
Okay.
with, the collaboration with OPA and DOA.
Right. And you're requesting
And the
for-
audit team, sorry.
Right. And you're requesting for $15,000 for the payment for the auditor for the, I think you used Deloitte. Who did you use last time? Ernst & Young?
Yes, Ernst &
Right?
Young, correct.
So it's about 15,000, right?
Yes.
Okay. With regards to the planner, Joseph Santos,
Yes.
I thought he was over at Hagatna Restoration,
He was detailed to HRRA from DCA.
and he's still
And-
over there.
No, he's with us now.
He's no longer with HRA, right?
Correct.
Okay. When did he transition back over to CHamoru Affairs?
He came back to DCA right before I got the assignment. So, June 2020? June 2020. Sorry, right after I got the assignment. June 2020.
2020. Okay. And also, again, the oversight chair mentioned the NF, the vacant, again, NF meaning not funded. So the one that says vacant with no NF, which is museum assistant and the building manager, those are
Right.
incorporated in your budget request? And even the one above that says Segundo Mas Gihilu.
Correct.
Oh, no, that one says NF.
Yeah, that's
So
not
I'm just
fund- not
looking
funded.
at two positions here that says vacant, but it doesn't have an NF beside it.
Correct.
So that means that it is in your budget?
Yes.
Okay, and the NF is not, right?
Correct.
Just wanted to verify. So the funding that you're requesting, as I was looking through your agency and what the haves, have-nots, and et cetera, I did come across some funding that has been given to, well, it's not to CHamoru Affairs, but it's in lieu of assisting CHamoru Affairs. And it was a board that was created called COSAS.
COSAS,
The
yes.
COSAS Board Advisors. And they received 25%. This Board of Advisors received 25% of building permit fees. Okay, that's been going. And according to FY21, the building permit fees came in at $560,000, which means that they would have received $140,000 for FY21. Now, who oversees this board? Who do they answer to? I mean, it was created, but, and where is this money going to? Have they received this?
The money that
funding?
you're referring to goes into the Guam Museum Fund, which is listed. The COSAS board is an advisory board for the Guam Museum. And
Okay.
so they advise on all museum-related matters, and they ultimately serve under the Board of Trustees. So the Board of Trustees is our overall board. And then the COSAS board deals only with museum-related issues.
Okay, and it says that the Guam Museum Fund receives 25% of the building fee.
Correct.
So is that, did you incorporate that in your budget as funding coming in?
Yes, it's listed as, sorry. So that's listed as a special fund. So we have local funds,
Right.
For FY 2022, we were appropriated $1,689,650 in local funds, and then the special fund was $338,547, and that's inclusive of the
That's for
the-
FY22.
the Guam
Was
Museum Fund.
338,504 was FY22. So your anticipation for FY23 is, of course, lower. It's 285,997. Do you attribute it to the TAF or the Guam Museum Fund?
No, so we actually, we were removed off of the TAF
Okay.
when the TAF took a hit during COVID, and then we were, our funding was replaced, that funding was replaced through the general fund.
Okay, so you're not receiving any TAF?
Not, we don't, no, not
Okay,
this, not currently.
Mr. Chair, yeah, I just noticed it, Mr. Chair, in the sheet, it says Guam Museum, then parentheses, TAF and GMF.
Right, that's normally where the special fund comes from, is the TAF.
Okay, but you're not going to be receiving TAF?
No, we were removed off of the
Okay,
TAF.
so you anticipate that the Guam Museum Fund, 285,997 is solely from what, building fund money, the 25% building fee?
Right.
Okay, well, it's showing here in FY, like I said, FY21, that it only came in at 140,000. So someone's going to go, it's going to be short, you know? And I don't see it growing unless we are going to tag on, like the chairman and I were talking about the military buildup and those buildings inside the fence, if they're being charged. I don't know, but I definitely know outside the fence they are, but I don't see any major growth other than military buildup that's going to give you the full amount of 285,997. Especially in FY21, we only received 140. That's 25% of the building fee. I have an OPA report here, dated January 14, 2022. And it's for Guam Preservation Trust, showing the 50% of the building fee, permit fees, building permit fees. And they had received 280,000 for 50%. And then that's Guam Preservation Trust, and of course, the museum at 140,000 for FY21. So I don't see where you're getting the funding from. So Mel, I guess, you know, I don't know if you have those documents to show the breakdown of that 285,997, but once you do, I appreciate if you give it to the oversight chair.
Okay.
So we can see where that money's coming from and be more realistic on any special funds coming your way, because we've seen such a shortfall, you know, especially last year in FY21. We're starting to see a little bit more growth in these special funds, but I really don't see it here in the building permit fees that are coming in, especially from the OPA's report from last year. So if you can look at that, that might be able, okay. Yeah, okay, if I'm not mistaken, you know where I think you're finding that? Yeah, that was in the governor's, by the way, the Guam Museum Fund 885,997 is on the governor's budget under the first, on page 4, where it's showing all the special funds. I think that's where you got the money from, but we need to break that down, because what funds the Guam Museum Fund? What funds it? You know, and that's where we need to see where that's money coming and being more realistic on what's anticipated to go in. You mentioned earlier, also, Mel, about the spending plan you have for the money that was provided to you from the art funding.
Yes.
And you said the plan was submitted I haven't seen it. Do you have a copy with you that you can maybe give, or did you already give one to the oversight chair? On the
No.
plans that you have
No,
for the...
sorry, I didn't clarify. The spending plan was submitted to us as requested by BBMR.
Oh,
but
the
I have a
spending
copy I
plan,
can
on how
provide
to
to
spend
you.
that money that was awarded
Yeah,
to you.
we can provide a copy to you.
And there was what, 1 point,
1.8, sorry, let me
1.8,
give you
right?
the exact number.
okay, can we also get that to the oversight chair? That
Yes.
spending plan?
Yes.
To tell us where, I'm hoping it goes to all these anticipated goals that you have, to cover some repairs that are needed.
Yes.
But curious to seeing where some of that funding is going to be going to as we look into
Our primary focus for the ARP is going to be on the infrastructure of the facility itself. So one of the big ticket items for, at least for the Guam Museum, is going to be for the HVAC. Unfortunately, even though the museum is only 7 years old, we've had some major issues with the air conditioning. And as you know, the HVAC is critical for preservation. We have to maintain the federal preservation standards, and so that humidity control, temperature control has to be consistent. Our AC just went down. We had to run a repair, and we were notified that our chillers are kind of at their end. And so the contractor basically told us we need to start preparing to replace these chillers. And so that's definitely going to be one of the major focuses for the ARP funding, is to get those repairs done and to ensure that we commit funding toward a regular maintenance plan for it, so that we don't have this issue again.
Okay, what about, have you had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Tyron over at the governor's office with regards to the infrastructure, bipartisan infrastructure bill that was passed to provide funding for infrastructure?
No, I have not.
Okay, that might be an opportunity to look for, especially when you're looking at your buildings and seeking assistance for those buildings in desperate need of repair, as well as for the CHamoru village on the water issue that you mentioned earlier. This is money meant for infrastructure, so hopefully you would be able to get some funding there. If you can look through that, appreciate that one, even before the budget, so we can see where we can save some money, before we use it. Before we lose it from the federal government. I know that there's a time frame on them. There's appropriation reserves. Mel, has there been any funding that was been set into reserves for your agency in FY21?
No. But
So there was no reserves?
No reserves, but we are anticipating a lapse of, sorry, one moment. I thought it was 125. We are anticipating a lapse of 59,622. And we are requesting for a rollover of that lapse to cover the additional or anticipated additional costs of the arch repair, so that if in the event that it does go over, that we will have the funds to cover it.
Okay, how about FY21? Did you receive any carryover authority there? And if you did, how much?
Carryover authority in FY21?
Yeah.
No, we didn't have a carryover.
No carryover?
What we did, there was a governor's transfer. Sorry, one moment.
I can tell you, as of March 31st, 2022, there is $102,839 that is in reserve.
We did, no, but we did take a transfer of, where is it? 161,337 was removed from us.
It was taken away from you.
Right.
Do you know why? Was it money that you didn't really need?
No, we always need money.
Of course.
It was just something that happened. There are several of us, several departments that had money taken and then transferred out to transferred into like DCID, Rev and Tax, GPD, GFD, GEC.
So Melvin, what suffered because of that transfer? I mean, when we appropriate funding, the legislature gives you a budget, and you're sitting before us in need of additional staff, supplies, and repairs, and we try to appropriate to the T, you know. So something must have, you know, fell short because that money was taken out of your account.
Well, we definitely are in much need of additional staff for our museum operations. Currently, we had 4 museum assistants that we run on a rotation for tours and after-hour events. And the challenge for us is that unlike when the museum was being managed under operational contract, you know, they're able to schedule out their employees for, you know, these late night events or whatever. Whereas for us, you know, we can't pay overtime, we cannot have them bank the hours. And so what we have to do is adjust schedules so that they're still making their 80 hours a week. But it also requires us to kind of run a rotation where we fall short. So there's been multiple times where, you know, Marilyn, who is in our administrative unit, or our curator, who really should not be running staff events, we have to kind of tap on each other to do it. I work a lot of nights and weekends as well, so we just kind of make do with it. It's not ideal. That's also reflected in our tour hours currently, which is not where we want to be. But, you know, we have to make sure that we have days and hours available for curating responsibilities and tasks. We have to make sure that we're not exceeding the 80 hours. And so the infusion of additional museum assistant staff definitely helps us to manage the event bookings, the after-hour bookings, and expand tour hours.
Okay, well, if you need that funding, then you should fight for your money to stay within your agency and, you know, not have it being transferred out. Because right now you have $150,000, that's including special funds in reserve, $150,000 for FY22 in reserve right now. And you just told us that you anticipate $59,662 in lapses for FY22. Is that what you anticipate?
Yes.
Even with these in reserves, even with this $150,000 in reserves,
I'm sorry, did you have
so
a question?
So do you still anticipate only $59,000 in anticipated carryover lapses, even when you have right now in reserve, taken away from you right now is $150,069. I mean, if you ask me, if you already know you're going to get 59, and you take the 150, you almost have $200,000 in carryover.
Senator, the lapse of $59,000 is inclusive of the reserves. We do have a projection analysis that we can share with you. We do have other requirements that we intend to use from the reserves. Okay. So after we use those under the other requirements, our lapse for FY 2022 would be the $59,000. Okay,
so it is after you utilize this reserves, then you'll have the 59, right?
Correct.
So you do have anticipation to spending
Correct.
it. Okay, thank you so much for that, Ms. Regis. I appreciate it. I think I just have one last question. Consulting services for museum best practices. Can you kind of explain to me what services are made available to the department through the consulting agreement, and how long is this contract for, and have consulting services been available in person or virtually? This is the one for $74,221.
So when the Guam Museum was under a contract, they also subcontracted consultation coming from like search, you know, like an archaeology company. We, under public management, we plan to do that. We also plan to do some consultation just for the accreditation of the museum. So those interpretive or those consulting funding that we're requesting will help the museum for their best practices.
Well, but you have, it was mentioned earlier that you have a museum curator right now on board, right?
Correct.
Yes.
And you would think that that individual would know the best practices for the museum, so why would you have to spend $74,221?
Well, we still need some consultation, maybe, or even technical services, just for the, to become part of the AAM accreditation. We have staff also, the museum assistants, the admin support. Maybe we may need some technical assistance just to get our museum, accredited or even trained.
I can understand, having to be a part of a certain association to be accredited, but yeah, is it really necessary? Especially if there's one area that you have in this spreadsheet of employees, the museum has a lot of employees. Those who are covering a museum assistant is already been filled. 1, 2, 3, 4 in this area. I just think that we're duplicating efforts here. If we already have a museum curator who gets, how much does a museum curator make, by the way?
A lot less than what it makes at a national standard, that's for sure.
Well, yeah, that's true. Nothing is at national standard here. But how much is he making? Do you know?
I can give you the exact number. You have it there? 60,000.
60? Yeah, that
60.
is quite low for a museum curator, actually. Yeah, but anyways, okay, just wanted to bring that up because I was kind of curious on this consulting service for museum best practices. Other than that, okay, I appreciate, especially the ARP funding and how you're going to be, the plans on spending it come forward, and then also look into the special funds regarding the building fee permit, building permit fees, okay? Find out to get a realistic amount for that area. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tello. Senator Brown, do you have any question for? We're a tag team here, the three of us.
I'm the last one here left. I wanted to ask, because you're on your unclassified and your classified staffing, even though you went from single digit, this year you're looking at having 17 classified on board. That's almost tripling since 2021, and then you have 3 unclassified. Who are the unclassified employees that you have besides yourself?
Sorry, Senator, I can't hear you. Can you repeat the question?
Who are the unclassified employees you have besides yourself? You have 3 listed.
Besides myself?
Yeah, who are they?
Leona Young, our museum administrator, and Chris Flores, who is our SPC.
Are these positions, is that position unclassified, the Guam Museum Administrator?
Yes.
It is an unclassified position?
Yes.
And is that designated by law? How did that determination come to be? Because I'm going to go back and look. I'm curious what the funding cost is when the museum was managed under contract versus now us continuing to add on and add on and add on, and the request to continue to add on for the museum. How was that position determined to be unclassified?
I do not know, Senator. That was what it was when I came in.
Well, I think it's still the same administration. You have no feedback from your predecessor on the management of the museum? Because I understand the contract, when that transition happened was the beginning of this administration, so I assume that's when the hiring of these positions occurred then? Or were any of these prior?
The hiring for the only hiring that occurred while I was here was for the museum assistants and the curator.
Oh, okay, I guess we'll just need to look and see how that structure.
But I can find out.
How was that determined and how was that made? Because I'm a little curious. Normally in an agency, it's a director maybe a deputy, maybe a secretary, and that's the extent. And then even with regards to SPC, I'm going to have to go back and look at what the authorization was for SPCs. I mean, I understand when we have like federally funded positions that might be, of course, short-term depending on funding, I can understand the need to have those positions filled with, you know, an SPC or someone who's unclassified because, you know, the funding has a lifetime that has an end date. But I'm a little concerned about the use of SPCs because they seem to be becoming a way of hiring unclassified employees within department and agencies that exceed what we normally would see as, again, the director, perhaps a deputy, and maybe a secretary that is staffing them. So that brings that question to mind. I think we need to look at that because I think the SPC now is being used to hire unclassified people and put them in positions that otherwise should be filled with classified employees. I also wanted to ask, because we did meet a couple of months ago with regards to the discussion of the existing funding you're supposed to be getting from the building permits that was put in place when the museum was created that took that money out of the Preservation Trust. And I'm going to be very much an advocate of returning funds to the Preservation Trust. So if it were to be funded by the general fund, I assume it would be a non-issue for you because the Preservation Trust at least will have the flexibility when there are years if there's less revenue coming in, they can adjust their projects because they're not hiring people with that funding. I mean, half of what they're receiving, the 50% cut that they have, really only sustains the Preservation Trust, but does not grant them additional funds that they had previously to implement projects. So I don't think it'd be an issue, would it, if it was funded from another source or from the general fund to make up that difference?
No.
So that we could return the trust back to make it whole again.
No, I don't have an issue with that. I did want to raise another issue that, you know, the Guam Museum is not, the Guam Museum is technically the Guam and Chamorro Educational Facility, but it's not a part of the TEF, the Territorial Education Fund. You know, which I think is appropriate given the role that it plays and the service that it provides to the community. And that, you know, it is designated as the Guam Chamorro Educational Facility.
I understand, but I mean, the trust was created almost 30 plus years ago with a very specific mandate, and the trust is operating, at least in my review, quite well. And I want them to continue their mission without the political interference of the legislature or anybody else with regards to prioritizing the projects that they set. So I understand the creation, and certainly during our administration, the museum was built, and it's certainly an asset to our community, and I think we recognize that. But I don't want that to be at the diminishment of other, and in the case of Preservation Trust, I can't think of any other project in the government of Guam or that was created by statute that is becoming independent and self-sufficient and delivering the quality projects that they are. I don't know of any other, unless anyone can enlighten me with regards to that. I think when things are going well, we should support them and not take their funds away. So I also wanted to ask with regards to the fees that you generate out of the payment, and I understand, of course, we've just gone through this pandemic. It's adversely impacted a number of your businesses, as you mentioned, that are renting at the Chamorro village. But where do those fees go? How does that offset your appropriation that's being subsidized at this point through the general fund? Where does that money go?
The money goes into a non-appropriated fund account.
Okay. And what happens with it?
That money is usually utilized to pay out like the utilities, for example, and the other costs that are not appropriated for.
How does that offset what you're asking for? Because I also noticed a substantial increase with regards this year on your utilities, but yet last year there were smaller amounts.
Because what was happening, well, part of it is that the utilities costs were less when there was less use, when we're operating at a lower capacity. But the challenge for the reason why you see an increase in the utilities costs is because when we lost that revenue, we're unable to pay it out of the NAF. And so we had to reprogram funding in order to support that operation and sustain it, keep it open.
Out of curiosity, if there was less use, how much did you have to offset in terms of power and water that normally would be paid out of these funds if the facilities were not being used as much? Because I know we just recently reopened the Wednesday market, right?
Right.
So, I mean, and under your authorized funds, for example, like power for 2022, you only had $5,000, water and sewer $15,000, telephone you had $0.
For the museum?
It doesn't say, it simply, this is
The
your
telephone was,
budget for Chamorro Fairs, so.
Yeah, the
it just
telephone
says-
increase is because that was being funded under the appropriation that paid for the contract. And so the contractor
Okay,
was
so
the one
so this
funding
is a-
that, or
this
paying
was-
that.
This
Right.
was a remnant of the contract then?
Right.
Okay, so this increase this year then is your anticipated costs with going back to hopefully normal
Correct.
operations. And so as your revenue increases with regards to that, how does it offset what's being placed here, or money that you're expecting us to appropriate? How do we offset that? If you're, let's say you're getting $20,000 and I'm just giving a figure, $20,000 in your rental, how do we offset that versus what we're being asked to appropriate? I don't want to double appropriate, and I don't want to give you more money than we have to. How does that offset?
It covers those costs that we couldn't pay when we didn't have the revenue. So, I mean, if we're able to bring in more revenue and cover costs like utilities, then it'll come out of there.
No, I understand, but my point is, let's just say power. You're asking in the 2023 budget for $35,000 in power. And you're anticipating, hopefully, if things go back to normal, your vendors and are going to be there, they're going to be paying their monthly rental. And let's say they come up with $20,000 in rental money. How does that offset what you're asking us? Because I don't want to add to, if you have revenue coming in from another source, I don't want to see us appropriating more money than we need to. How are we addressing that? How are we offsetting that?
We can probably use that money to fund our changing exhibit. In the past budget appropriation, we didn't have enough funding.
I understand, but I don't see how you get the liberty of deciding where you take your excess funds. I mean, we're assuming that the budget is to tell us and the people of Guam what we're using the money for. I mean, I don't know how you get to take the money and decide how you wanted to use it. If it's extra funds coming in, are you authorized by law to do that? How are you doing that?
I don't understand.
Yeah. I'm saying if you simply were not generating any fees and rental, and you're, as other government agencies that come to us, they're saying, okay, we need $35,000 for power, we need $63,000 for water and sewer, but we're also generating revenue, and you're telling me you're offsetting that by any money you have coming in to pay the utilities.
Are we talking about the NAF or the budget appropriation?
I'm talking about your rental revenue that you will receive, or hopefully will see an increase on at the Chamorro Village.
Okay, so that we can use that to fund security services. Right now, we don't have no CCTV,
Okay, and what
no security.
authorization do you have to do that? Where in this budget does it tell us we can use that for that? Or do you have something in law in your creation that allows you that flexibility with any additional funds? So you want to know where the funds are going that you get to generate. Where does that money go? There's got to be a prescribed use for it.
Right. Yeah, by law, it is built for us to sustain. It's supposed to be self-sustaining, that if we're generating these funds, then...
And then that's my point, just like with Customs, because Customs has their user fee at the airport that they charge every passenger. And up until this pandemic, pretty much, they relied on that to actually... that revenue to actually pay for their operations and pay for their employees. Of course, in the interim, because of the pandemic, the government of Guam has been subsidizing their operations. And then I asked them that question yesterday. As we see increase to the passenger fee, you see more revenue coming in on what was your revenue stream, and yet at the same time, we've been subsidizing you for the last 2 years. How are you going to offset? So they decrease that amount in the general fund and increase what they're generating on their own money. I want them to use the money that they're generating rather than continue being subsidized. So that's how they can demonstrate. And Mr. Chair, we definitely need to follow up with them what formal mechanism they're going to have in their accounting to show us that. So I would like to see what money you generate offset what we're appropriating versus you guys just having more money to decide how you want to spend it. How do you address that with the revenue you have coming in?
Well, the revenues increase, I mean, we'll pay it out of those revenues. But if the revenues are not there, I mean, the reason why we're requesting for it is because we don't know, we don't have it.
I understand, but as it's coming in and you have it, I want to see it offset the money we're subsidizing or the additional money that we're appropriating.
So would it be acceptable for us to pay, let's just say that the revenues increase and we start paying utilities out of those revenues to lapse the appropriation
I
and
would
return it
prefer
to the
that,
general
yes,
fund?
and then if there's additional lapse revenue and you have another need for it, then you can come back and ask for it. But I don't prohibit, nothing to prohibit you from doing that, but at least we know how the money's being spent.
Okay.
Because it doesn't make a lot of sense where you have the liberty to charge fees, but then we don't know how it's getting spent, and then we're subsidizing everything else. From my side of the table, I don't see why that would be acceptable.
Well, I mean, all of the non-appropriated funds are audited and accounted for. So, I mean, if
I know
we
that,
are...
but you're getting that revenue on top of what you're asking us to give you, and I'm sure there are other priorities in the government we would want to address with any additional funds that we would see as even more critical. Some people think it's nice to have a museum, great, rah-rah, but they compare that to having another police officer on the street. Some people may look at that differently. If you're a patient up at GMH and you don't have the resources and medicines and other things you need, you might think that's more critical than the museum. So I'm just saying with regards to, I don't think it's fair. You get to generate additional revenue and then we get to pay for everything else. And then you get to decide what you do with your additional revenue. Otherwise, why are we appropriating? I would reduce your appropriation. I just think, Mr. Chair, we need to go back and look at how that's going to be properly addressed so that if they're receiving their revenue to be self-sustaining, then they need to live off that and not expect us to subsidize from other areas in the government. I just think that needs to be properly, not just for the museum, but any other government entity that's generating revenue, unless by law we've prescribed how those funds are to be paid or how they're supposed to use them.
As a matter of fact, we can put the verbiage into the Budget Act, that any funds that are appropriate to you, if you generate any funds through your fees, and that includes even customs and anybody else, that the funds, general fund will be not first, would be secondary and only used in the event you don't generate funds to cover it. And I think that can work perfectly because,
that's
it's
fair.
like you mentioned, Mr. Wampan, if the money comes in, you'll be willing to use it, but if it doesn't, you need a backup because you need to still stay open. And I understand where Senator Brown's come from, exactly. And that may be the proper verbiage to put in the Budget Act to ensure.
I think we should. And again, just in all fairness, I mean, if there's other things the museum wants to do and they're coming back on the table because it takes off everything else in the government, then we get to say what we prioritize. That's our main job. Our job is to appropriate the budget and certainly account and know where it's going for. You mentioned you have the capital improvement grant. Is that just primarily for the CHamoru village to refurbish or repair?
Yes.
Because granted, that facility was built over 30 plus years ago.
Right. We're in pursuit of it. We don't know yet if we're going to win it, but it is primarily for the CHamoru village.
And it would be what are you looking at doing in terms of what your priorities would be to do? What are you looking at enhancing or improving or repairing? What are the more critical areas that are needed?
Oh, like what
there?
type of work are we looking at the CHamoru village?
What would
gosh. How much time do you have? There's a lot of major issues. Some of them are like the windows and doors are really old. If you've been keeping up in the news, we've been victim to a number of break-ins. We've kind of just had to make do. So like one of the places they target is the doors that have a 10-inch glass pane because somebody can squeeze through it. So we've just had to kind of reinforce it with like a steel bar so that like the last break-in was at the Micronesian jeweler. Thankfully, the individual was not able to gain entry because we had reinforced those doors. Some of the windows are the old like metal louver type windows. A lot of the roofs have leaks in them. There's a number of electrical issues. The drainage for a lot of the walkways, the ponding basins, or that whole area is a flood zone, so it includes some of that flood mitigation. The FESPAC hut renovation that I mentioned to you earlier. There's the what is it? I don't know what the actual term is, but it's basically our main electrical panel is it just wasn't constructed properly, and so we've actually had the whole village got shut down just from a electrical shortage, and so we kind of have a patch repair in there right now that keeps it functional. It's just not ideal. It's not functioning the way it should. And so a lot of these issues are going to be addressed. The Sagandananya reconstruction, we're hopeful for the addition of the commercial kitchen. The restroom repairs, we did get some QC money, but it's only enough for us to repair one restroom. And so, a lot of those issues need to be addressed. But the hope is that once we're able to do this, that, this can help kind of grease the wheel, so to speak, as we address the increase or adjustment of our fee schedule.
Well, and I think also even the walkways there, I noticed are becoming uneven, and certainly
Yeah,
for
that's on the,
for older people, disabled, and even anybody past 45.
And that is
The
that
odds
is one of
the odds of falling and tripping are pretty good.
Yeah, that's one of the items is to regrade the walkways. We've actually had an incident in the past where we were, somebody had fallen and gotten hurt, and we had to go to court and deal with that on that level. And so, these are all things that need to be addressed. Lighting, we're hopeful to go after the DOI energy grant for some solar. I know that it's, we have solar at the FestPack huts, but not on the village proper, which would really be great. I mean, we're hopeful that we can even include a request for the battery storage because, even when we have the FestPack solar panels operational, if we're not using that power as we generate it, then we just lose it. And so it's definitely helpful for us to be able to bank that power and decrease our energy consumption.
Well, and then also I noticed just when now that you do have the markets back, I mean, a lot of the vendors do set up on the landscaping there, and the landscaping really the quality of that has deteriorated and died over the years, literally.
Oh, definitely. And I think that that's one of the, that's definitely part of the focus in our
If you can move them to the other side of the parking lot where the additional huts were built, I think that might be certainly more beneficial to the landscaping there. That definitely needs to be enhanced as well, just because for our visitors and our residents going down there. I mean, I recall the intent in the design was really to almost have a walkthrough, like you literally were walking through one of the older villages on Guam. And I guess to enhance that experience. And granted, it's been 30 plus years and the government does a lousy job with maintenance, but certainly because it's such a highlight and was a highlight when our visitors were here, I assume it will continue to be. When the numbers increase, those are certainly the areas we'd want to significantly enhance for a visitor experience as well. So anyway, we look forward to that. With that, Mr. Chair, I have no further questions at this point.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Brown. With that, we will consider the verbiage as my colleagues brought up, and I know you're in agreement with that, and then we can always come back if you need the funding, and then we readjust as we need to, all right?
Okay.
With that, the committee will conclude this budget hearing with the Department of CHamoru Affairs. The committee will continue to receive testimony. Please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriations and Housing and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. @gmail.com or to my office located at Rand Care Building, 2nd floor, Suite 3, 761 Marine Corps Drive, Tamuning, Guam. Jesus Masi for your attendance today, Mr. Wampet, and your staff, the program coordinator. Thank Susan for attending and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching. This budget hearing on Bill 276-36 CR relative to the Department of Home Affairs is duly heard and is now adjourned at 3:30. Please be safe. Take care.